Good evening, everyone. I'm Hector Gunther, Chair of the Comprehensive Financial Advisory Committee of the Town of Barnstable. We meet every other Monday throughout the year, except during July and August, when we meet only once in each of those months. I think we'll start with calling the roll. Chris Lauzon, can you call the roll, please?
Yes. Hector,
Yes.
Chuck,
Yes.
Lillian,
Muted.
Lillian, are you muted? I see her name here, so I'm gonna say she's here.
I'm here.
All right. Jim,
Present.
Tom,
Present.
Jeremy,
Present.
Chris King,
Yes, here.
and I am present. Everybody's here.
Excellent. All right. If there are any members of the public here, well, first of all, I'm supposed to inquire whether anybody's taping the meeting, and if so, to make yourself known. And item number 2 on the agenda is for public comment. If there's any member of the public who wishes to comment, please go ahead. Item number 3 on the agenda, James Benoit, from the town's information technology department. James is here to talk with us about file sharing, which was an idea brought up by Jim Sproul a few meetings ago. And so, James Benoit, welcome, and the floor is yours.
Thank you. Jim Benoit, Director of IT for the town. I won't take up much of your time, but Mark Melton approached me about options for a potential file sharing platform for the committee. And after talking with Mark, I think the easiest solution is we already have an internal file sharing server. So that allows us to create accounts for all of you where you'd sign in with your email address and a password. You get into the system, you could upload files, share with each other, create folders, kind of basically an online repository where you can put files, organize them, and kind of share them between yourselves. It's not like a collaboration tool where you can work on documents simultaneously, but it would allow you to kind of upload common documents, make changes, upload them again, put like edited by whoever, that kind of thing. It is a system that we already have, so there's no additional cost. I would just need your email addresses, and we can create accounts for all of you. I can kind of just briefly show you what it looks like. I'm gonna.
That sounds good, Jim. But before you do that, can Jim or Mark sort of address the open meeting law issues involved in working on shared documents on a file drive?
Yeah, so that's a good point, because if we're going in and pulling a file down and working on it collaboratively, offering the opportunity for feedback back and forth between committee members outside a public meeting, that could create the appearance of a violation of the open meeting law. So I think it's more of it would be more of just a repository for, like, as a CIP working group is editing a document or creating a document and then putting it on a shared drive for others to view and comment on. I think you couldn't go back and forth continuously, basically doing work outside of an open meeting. So you'd have to be careful about how you go about working in that folder, and creating or basically having a meeting by going back and forth and sharing comments and that. So it does create a little bit of a challenge for us. I'm not sure if it would be helpful for the committee to have, though, a central repository so you can upload and download files as opposed to using email. I think that's really what this would end up offering you an option to do. Instead of emailing some things back and forth, you'd be able to access this stuff. But Jim, do other committees use this file sharing tool, or
No,
would this
no.
be the first? This would be the first time. Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah. So I'm not sure if it's going to allow you to achieve your objective, because if your objective was to have a tool where people can go in and work on documents
Right.
back and forth without having a meeting, because technically, I guess like the subcommittee for the capital improvement program could basically go in here and just draft their report outside of an open meeting and then decide, okay, this looks good, let's go to the final version and have a meeting. And that doesn't offer the opportunity to the public to see what you've been deliberating through the process of creating that report.
Mark, so just thinking about the practical realities here, but if right now, what we do is with no comment and no back and forth, just share edits to a document and don't comment on them, just say we're putting something together and person A is responsible for this section and person B is responsible for that, and somebody's accountable for rolling it all up and putting it together. Functionally, couldn't we use this repository the exact same way?
Yes.
And
yeah,
I don't know if there has to be some oversight or auditing function, but it would be easier than having to. I could just send a note out saying, I put my sections in, it's on the server in location A.
Yep.
And we're done.
Yep. And I would say all I would caution the committee to do is, have the public meeting to discuss what was uploaded. That's all. And, don't use it as a tool to create your report from scratch to finish and then have one meeting to review the final product. I would say, continue to have your meetings as you go along, sharing these files, because it will make it probably a more efficient process, as you just outlined, creating an opportunity to edit things and upload them so that other committee members could see what those changes were prior to the public meeting coming up, which is where they will be discussed.
Got it.
Jim, what application is it? Is it SharePoint or
It's kind of a proprietary system. It's called Liquid Files.
Liquid Files?
Yeah, it's a product we bought several years ago. It's kind of flexible, and we don't have to pay a per user fee for it, which you would with SharePoint.
Well, having listened to everyone's comment, it seems to me we could give it a shot. The way forward, Jim, Benoit, is that maybe Mark, you could aggregate all of our names and emails and send them to Jim. Is that a good way to proceed?
Yes, it's easy enough to do. But Jim, you want to provide them a little overview of what it looks like?
Yeah, just quickly, I'll just show you.
Is that okay, Hector?
Yeah, that's fine.
Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So you get a link, you sign in with your email address. Initially, you'll get an email from the system that will kind of walk you through setting up the account, creating a password. Once you sign in, you'll see there's a file share group here called Comprehensive Financial Advisory Committee. Click on that. And then here, it'll just list all the files. So you can upload a file, upload a folder, create folders, or download multiple files as a zip file. So for example, if I want to upload something, And everything is virus scanned, or scanned for malware when you upload it, so it should be relatively safe. Um, and that's essentially it. And whoever we've added to this particular group will be able to see these files, download them, and then upload additional files. You can create folders if you want to create folders for different members, that kind of thing. That's really all there is to it.
And does the system support, I see you have, it looks like Word, does it support the Microsoft Office if we have PowerPoint or Excel or Word?
Or PDF.
Yeah, you can upload pretty much any kind of document.
All right, cool, thank you.
Mhm.
And go ahead.
I'm sorry, Jim, you're the administrator for this liquid file, so any names would, for the CFAC committee or CFAC would go through you? And then
Yes,
you
once
would,
we create the initial accounts. If you had any problems, you can reach out to me.
okay.
So Jim, I would just give you all of the committee members' email addresses, and that's all you would need to create the access to the CFAC folder here.
Yep. As soon as I add them to the
Okay.
group, they'll get an email, and then they can go ahead and create their password and go from there.
Okay.
It seems to me that it makes sense that, say, if Chuck McKenzie had a document and he uploaded it, he ought to put his initials or his name in the file name so that we know, so that it's known who submitted the file. Does that make sense, Jim?
Yeah, I would say go up with some kind of process, either create folders or naming convention.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's where it gets tricky, because somebody on the committee may want to think about perhaps Hector, the chair, or your designee would be, the individual assigned to managing the file structure in here.
mhm,
Like folder names and so forth, because it can get unwieldy if everybody just starts uploading a bunch of files for everybody else to look at, and you may not know whether it's a CIP related file or an operating budget file or something else. So that naming convention is going to be important
right.
for the committee going forward.
So it seems to me that Jim Sproul should create a folder. First folder we'll have will be CIP Subcommittee 2025. Something like that. And then if Chuck has a document to upload, he could put it in that particular folder with his initials or whatever, however we would know that it was Chuck's document. But I guess my follow-up question is, so say Chuck and Jeremy upload their sections of the CIP subcommittee report, then Jim Sproul can take over merging them and editing them and creating sort of a master document. And there's no open meeting law violation with that, is there?
No, I don't think so. As long as you again conduct your regularly scheduled meeting to review
Right.
what's been done.
Right.
Don't use this as a tool to basically replace the public meetings that you normally would have had to develop your
Right.
reports.
Right. Okay, well, I think it's worth trying. That's my opinion. I don't know how others feel.
I think it's very valuable because if you use it as a repository for all the drafts, the other members of the subcommittee will be able to review the drafts and come up with questions or comments about the other members' work, so that when you do meet, it would streamline the process a little bit. I have a question about that, Jim. Since we have all of these documents of members who are submitting reports, how do we pull it all out together? Let's say that we want to now put together the entire CIP subcommittee report. So what do we do? Just lift each of the documents and create a new one? What are the mechanics involved here?
Yeah, it's really just a file upload download. So if there's multiple files you're trying to combine, you would download those to whoever's compiling everything, download it, edit it into one document, and then upload that single document back and call it, final or something like that.
Oh, I see. Yeah. So we essentially, we could put together the whole document right here in this shared file.
Yeah, you need to edit it somewhere else, but you could definitely
Yeah, yeah,
compile it and upload it here. Yep.
yeah.
And Jim, the download says download as a zip. So say Jim Sproul is downloading two documents that are going to go into his final CIP report. Does he have to download them as a zip, or can he just download them to his computer as at home, just as a Word document, for example?
Yeah, if you click on one, you can download it as like a document or Word doc or whatever it is. You don't necessarily have to download as a zip. I think that's if you're trying to download multiple files at the same
Yeah.
time,
Right.
or you can do them individually.
Okay.
Yeah, I think this will be very, very helpful.
All right. Well, I would propose that Mark, that you submit our emails to Jim, and then Jim will or the system will send out an email to each of us inviting us to sign up to the Town of Barnstable shared portal, and we go from there.
Sounds good. I'll do that this evening after the meeting.
Right. Great. All
Thank you,
right.
Jim.
Thank you,
Thanks.
Jim.
Thank you. I
Thank you,
appreciate it
Jim.
very much.
Thank
Mark,
you.
as soon as I get that list, we'll get you invited, and probably by tomorrow you can sign in.
Great.
Thanks so
Thanks,
much.
Thank you.
Jim.
All right, item number 4 on tonight's agenda is to approve the minutes of February 10th, 2025. Do I have a motion to accept the minutes?
So moved.
Second,
Right. Any comments and corrections on the minutes?
I
I
did
do
notice
have
something minor, just I wasn't there, but I did notice that Jen Cullum was listed as a counselor.
Right,
She's no longer a counselor, she's a school committee member.
right. So
Just
for Teresa, if you're editing here, I would substitute on top of page 2, 5th, 6th line, 7th line down, where it says counselor column, I would say chair, label her as chair column, or
I will make-
facilities subcommittee chair.
I will make that correction. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's on the first page too, Teresa. So you may want to just scan the document any place where her name comes up.
I will do that. Thank you.
Right. Any other comments? I do have some. Teresa, on page, and they're just minor, on page 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7th bullet down, starting with the word a draft intended use plan was issued for clean water projects. In the third line, there's a reference to an annual cap of $50 million. I think we need to specify what that is a cap for. And it's an annual cap for borrowing under the markets, the Cape and Islands Water Protection Trust.
No, it's the annual cap for borrowing through the state revolving loan fund.
Okay. So Teresa, can you add that?
I have that too. Thank you.
Okay. The next bullet down, starting if a neutral flow policy, you want to say flow neutral? So reverse those two words. And then the second line in that same bullet, I would, it reads guarantee that financing, not all. I would delete the words financing and not. So so it reads, it does not guarantee that all projects are funded.
Okay, I have
Okay.
that one too. Thank you.
And then correspondence from committee members. Second word says CFAC, it should be CIP.
Okay, thank you.
And that's what I had. Anybody else see anything? If not, Chris Lazon, can you call the roll, please?
Yes, Hector,
Yes.
Chuck,
Yes.
Lillian,
Yes.
Jim,
Yes.
Tom,
Yes.
Jeremy,
Yes.
Chris King,
Yes.
and I'm going to abstain because I wasn't there, but
Okay.
so that passes.
Okay. Item number 5 on the agenda. 5A is to review the list of proposed fiscal year 2026 capital projects. And this was a list, 5-page list that Mark Milne sent around within the last few days.
Mhm.
Mark, do you want to talk about this?
Sure. Thank you, Hector. I'm going to share my screen. Okay, can everybody see this okay?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So yeah, back on February 17th, I sent out a PDF document that included all of the capital submissions for the 5-year plan. And in that were highlighted the ones that we were recommending to bring forward for funding. So this is a little different format. This is coming right out of the capital improvement plan book that we're currently drafting. And this section is where the town manager's recommendations are included. So I don't clutter your screen with all the projects that aren't coming forward for funding. These are just the projects that we're recommending coming forward for funding. So the first group that you see here are the enterprise fund recommendations. And there are several here. I think we have 8 enterprise fund projects altogether, totaling about 8.8 million. However, in conversation with our Director of Public Works today, we're actually going to pull back on these 2 solid waste enterprise fund projects. It turns out that they're going to push these to fiscal year 27 after reevaluating their equipment out there. They can get another year out of them, they believe. And so we're going to drop those 2 projects right here for a total of $200,000. But everything else is staying. So
Mark,
we have one. Yes.
sorry to interrupt. Are you going to send us these after the meeting, or should we take
Yeah.
screenshots of these?
No, I will send you these.
Awesome, thanks.
Yep.
Sorry.
Sure, no problem. So we have one project at the airport. Most of it's going to be grant funded here by actually it's under the bond issue column here, which needs to be changed, but it's really going to be grant funded. FAA and Mass DOT will fund most of that project with a small contribution from their reserves. We've got one project out at the old Barnstable Fairgrounds, one for Prince Cove Marina building improvements, some HYCC mechanical upgrades, the continuation of replacing the mechanicals and other components of that facility. Our traditional $1.5 million of pipe replacement program for our public water system. And traditionally, we've done a couple $100,000 a year for upgrading wells and pumps and so forth throughout the system. And then some continuation of pump rehabilitation program for our existing sewer infrastructure, and a fence replacement around the main plant there on Bursa's Way. Then we get into the general fund recommendations, which have not changed from what I sent you on February 17th. We have about 40 40 projects here, listed under the general fund category. We categorize them, whether they're infrastructure type projects, facilities, waterways, water quality, and school facilities. Total of about almost 26 million in total with these 40 projects. Many of them being financed with new borrowing authorizations. We're also using about $6.5 million of reserves for some of the smaller amounts. We traditionally don't borrow for anything under $250,000. And so you'll see most of the projects that are 250 or less are included in that column. We fund those out of our general fund cash reserves or our capital trust fund cash reserves. And then we have some other funding sources here, which include $416,000 from our Waterways Improvement Fund to replace a patrol vessel for the harbor master. We also are, and I shared this with the committee previously, we're using about $780,000 of remaining balances from projects that have been completed. We're going to repurpose those funds and direct them towards these new projects here. So that's where the $1,164,000 comes from those balances remaining in older appropriations that have been completed and the amount that we're pulling out of our Waterways Improvement Fund for that patrol vessel. And that spreadsheet that I sent you on the 17th provides the details behind how much is being allocated to each project and from what funding source. This is a little bit more consolidated. And then we have our comprehensive wastewater management plan, of course, the biggest section of our capital program, a total capital program of about 101 million, and this is 66 million of it. The two big projects coming forward are the Centerville sewer expansion, the south portion. We already are currently funded for the north portion. This is the funding for the south phase. And the big project here is the Finney's Lane neighborhoods. This is multiple neighborhoods off of the Finney's Lane area. Big project. Both of these have been listed on the Department of Environmental Protection's 2025 intended use plan, making them eligible for funding, financing through the state revolving loan fund, as well as a 25% subsidy from the Cape and Islands Water Protection Fund, since they're listed on that IUP. So good news there. And we currently have the resources necessary to repay all of those borrowing authorizations for those two projects, as well as the cash projects that you see here for the other 5. Those are all permitting and design, preliminary design. Some are final design for other sewer expansion projects that we currently have underway. We're going to use fund reserves to pay for those costs. We're not borrowing for the design and planning costs. So yeah, I just wanted to share that with the committee. I gave you that detailed list with all the funding sources. This is a little different view of it. I'll share this with the committee as well. We continue to draft that comprehensive document. We plan on having the PDF version available on March 3rd in accordance with our budget calendar. We will be submitting it to the town council in PDF format. We will also submit it to the committee in PDF format. We'll share it with you as well at the same time, so you'll have it. And then if you want a physical hard copy of the document, please let me know. For the past several years, we've been trying to cut back on the physical books that we produce because of the cost associated with producing those, because people are getting more used to PDF formats and electronic documents and reviewing things that way, and not having these big, thick, hardbound copies laying around your house. So using them for door stops or coffee table material for guests as they come to your home. But we certainly will print a hard copy for you. If you want one, just let me know. We'll add it to what we plan on taking to the printer. But hard copy printouts won't be available until we think the end of the following week. And so, but we will certainly get you the PDF version by that date that it's going to the town council. So you'll have that to work with as well. So it's but we also have several projects here. Let me share this once again. I forgot to show you these. We have several projects that we're going to recommend or bring forward to the Community Preservation Committee for funding. All of these ones here listed in the CPC column. The process is, and it's typically going to be the Department of Public Works for all of these. They file a letter of intent with the Community Preservation Committee. The Community Preservation Committee holds a meeting. They discuss that letter of intent with Public Works Department. If they decide they want the Public Works Department to go forward with a full application for a funding request before that committee, they instruct them to do so at that meeting. DPW will then go back with a full application to the Community Preservation Committee for their consideration for funding. If the Community Preservation Committee approves the funding for any one of those projects, we then take it to the town council for their approval for funding. And so our intention is to have these projects, we have 7 projects here listed as projects that will go before the Community Preservation Committee for either all of the funding or part of the funding. That remains to be determined, but these will all probably come forward to the town council out of the capital improvement plan budget cycle because of that CPC or Community Preservation Committee involvement. So we have to handle these one at a time before CPC and then bring them forward to the council if they advance out of the Community Preservation Committee. Another smaller project here, the Mosswood Columbarium, we are going to seek a funding for that from the Kirkman Trust Fund. That we have a trust fund advisory committee that meets, discusses applications from our cemetery operations on certain projects that are eligible for Kirkman Trust Fund funding. We anticipate bringing this one forward to the Trust Fund Advisory Committee, which then issues its recommendation to the town manager, who is actually the overseer, their trustee of the Kirkman Trust Fund. So we plan on bringing that one through that funding cycle or that funding source. And then over here under public roads maintenance, we have $100 million being provided for from the Chapter 90 funds that we receive on an annual basis. So up above here in the general fund section, you'll notice that the public roads program is listed for only $29.50 for funding here. And typically that's almost $4 million a year. But what happened is when the millionaire's tax came in, they're dedicating a portion of the new revenue that the state receives under that tax to public infrastructure programs. And that gave us an opportunity to take $1 million from our Chapter 90 funding and redirect it towards the public roads program maintenance that we do on an annual basis. And so that's why that's listed down here under Chapter 90 for $1 million. We normally get $2 million of Chapter 90 funds every year from the state, but now we get $3 million as a result of that new tax. And we're dedicating that new $1 million we get every year to the public roads maintenance program. So that was a nice windfall for the town of Barnstable. And we anticipate that program to continue to be funded that way. The FY26 budget, Governor Healy's budget proposal does include the continuation of that program funding. And so we are including it again here, which allows us to reduce the capital trust fund contribution to $2.95 million as opposed to $3.95 million. Any questions on that? Again, I'll share that, Chuck, with the committee, the town manager's recommendation section here.
That'd be awesome. Thanks, Mark.
Yep. Okay.
Mark, I'm just curious, the town manager and his senior team have made some choices. Were there some other projects that came very close, but were not in the end recommended? I guess where I'm headed with the question is, was Mark Ells, was he working towards a total dollar amount that he could fund, that he could
Exactly.
recommend?
Yeah, exactly. That's what it is, Hector. Especially in particular the general fund. Okay, that we'll start there because we have this capital trust fund as the main funding mechanism to finance our general fund program, and we're targeting every year. And I this is something you've seen in the past. I've reviewed it with the committee, and we'll share this again. I'll share this document again with the committee, the CIP subcommittee. We have that trust fund, capital trust fund cash flow analysis that we do every year. And when we did that analysis, we looked at a target of about $15 million in new capital trust fund borrowings every year for the next 5 years. That's about what the capacity of that trust fund can handle right now. And so this gets us, I know we're a little bit higher than that. I think you're seeing, we just showed you about $20 million in new borrowing from the capital trust fund. But what you didn't see is that we're going to rescind about $4 million in existing borrowing authorizations for projects that have not gone forward. We'll be bringing forward to the council a rescission of that borrowing authorization and redirecting that borrowing authorization basically to the FY26 capital program. So that gets us, we were shooting for a $15 million target. I think we netted it around 16. We can work with that. And on the cash side, we were really targeting using no more than $2 million of the school savings and $2 million of the municipal savings to fund those smaller CIP items under the general fund. We ended up using about 800 in that spreadsheet I sent to you on the 17th. I think it's down the bottom. It highlighted the savings that we were using. Yeah, it was $852,000 of school savings for school projects, and just over $2 million in municipal savings, $2,056,000 for other departments' projects, for a total of $2.9 million. We're comfortable with using that level. We have about $23 million in savings that are not part of that town council's policy reserve. So having that excess, it allows us to take care of some of these smaller projects using cash as opposed to borrowing for them. Yeah, so a lot of projects don't get funded that came forward for requests for funding for 26. It's always been the case. We never have the funding available to address every single request that comes before us. The other thing that we have to take into consideration is the existing appropriations that we have that we're working off of. I think there's an excess of 25 of them just for our school department alone. Public Works is probably close to another 100. And so we have to be able to make sure our existing staff can manage what we're giving them for projects. So that was a consideration as well. And that also keeps the number of projects that we bring forward down. But as you can see, we have over 50 brand new projects here. We still have an existing plate to work off of and to the projects to deliver on. So those are just a few of the things that are taken into consideration when deciding which ones to fund. Some projects are just not ready for the next stage of funding. They submit for them for FY26, but when we sit down and talk to departments, they're just not ready to really move forward. They're not going to get to that project within the next 12 months. So we're not going to dedicate or lock up funding for a project that they're not going to be able to get off the ground within the next 12 months.
Right. So for example, I'm looking on the page. That's one of the pages that you sent to us on the 17th. Public Works, Old Town Hall, JFK Museum improvements.
Yep.
And the request was for $1.9 million. in fiscal 26 and $1,610,000 in fiscal 27. So it's fair to assume that the ask for those projects may come back around next
Yeah.
cycle.
Every single one of these that did not get funded, most likely
Right.
we're going to see again next year. And in that one in particular, the reason why we didn't bring forward the funding request now is because we want to make sure that we're in agreement. We have a tenant there, right? I mean,
Yeah.
and the museum is there, and we want to make sure that the folks who run the museum are in agreement with what's being brought forward here for a project that meets their needs to continue their operation. They are a major tenant, as well as what components, if any, of that project may be eligible for CPC funding. Those are some of the unanswered questions. And so again, that project wasn't prime time for that one to come forward for funding just yet. But if the nature of our government, being a town council manager format of government, we meet twice a month, allows us to take items out of cycle if we determine the need to be so great that we should not postpone this any longer. So we could always bring a project like that forward anytime during the fiscal year, provided that all the questions are answered. But we weren't quite ready to bring that one forward at this point.
Right. And then just to pick another sizable 7-figure number 49, Finney's Lane and Raquacket Lane sidewalk extensions, $1.5 million. That will just be deferred to a future year.
Yes. Yep. It's going to come back. Yep. So again, we have a limited amount of funding. Can't pay for all of these. We can't issue all of this in a form. We don't have capacity to issue $35 million worth of new borrowing authorizations in 1 year.
Right. Okay, thanks. Any other committee members have questions? All right, I would propose that we move on. Item 5B on the agenda is an update on the development of the fiscal 2026 operating budget. So Mark, what's happening there?
Yeah, so as we wrap up the CIP, we're going to start getting into the operating budget development. We've already costed out all salaries for existing positions for next year. We know what that cost increase is going to be. And we just started to receive some of the major assessments that we have to provide funding for every year. For one of them being a regional school district, Cape Cod Tech Regional High School. We just received their assessment, their estimated assessment at this point in time. I'm not sure if they've formally approved their budget yet, but based on the budget that they were going to bring forward for approval, our assessment is going up almost 13% next year, or about just over $600,000, a pretty significant increase. Two factors are involved in that. One being, I believe they had almost a 6% budget increase in their requested budget for next year. And then secondly, and more importantly, that it's impacting a higher impact on us in Barnstable is that we had an increase in the number of students that are enrolled out there. And so our share of their costs has gone up as a result of us becoming a higher percentage of our overall student population, which is how they allocate the cost. So two factors there. So that we got that assessment in, so we know what that is now. We also received our pension assessment from Barnstable County Retirement. That ended up being 3% higher than what we anticipated. We had originally budgeted 5.3%. It came in at 8.3%. Again, I think one of the bigger contributing factors there is that we are our total active employees who participate in that system are a higher percentage of the overall population than they were a previous year. And again, that assessment is based upon active payrolls. And so it's a little bit higher, coupled with, I believe they did not hit their investment return targets under their actuarial assumptions. And so those two factors really contribute towards the increase in the county retirement assessment. We also got some good news out of the Cape Cod Municipal Health Group. They voted rate increases recently, I think about 2 weeks ago. We had budgeted somewhere at about 8.5% increase, projected increase in the rates, which is similar to what we saw in 25. They came in at 6.5%. So the savings that we see there, we can redirect towards the cost overruns that we're seeing in the regional high school assessment and the county's pension assessment. So those are the big three that we wait for every year, try to, that impact our operating budget, because they're all part of the fixed cost. And then, we have to cover all of our fixed costs before we determine what's left over for our operating budgets. So that's where we're at. We are working on putting together our next bond issue. We're scheduled for May, so we're estimating what that debt service cost is going to be and incorporating that into this projection. Our next step is going to be start meeting with department heads to review the additional funding requests and the new positions or upgrades in positions that they've all put forward under their budget submissions. And we'll determine whether or not we can have any capacity to fund any of those additional requests. We're also reviewing existing positions. I believe the school department met recently, and their meetings have been public. You can go back and you can look at some of the decisions that they're making. There have been some reductions identified in their proposed budget. It hasn't been final approval yet, but they're being challenged with being able to continue many positions that were added to their operating budget that were formally funded by these ESSER grants we received as a result of the pandemic. Those funds have expired. We no longer have them available to continue paying for these new positions that were created with that funding source. And so now we're looking at having to reduce some of these positions in order to get the budget back into balance and not depend too much upon our reserves to continue our current service levels. We do plan on bringing forward a budget that will use some reserves because we have some healthy reserves right now, but that's not a forever funding source, as you know. So the objective is to wean ourselves off of that funding source in later years. Due to the reserve balances that we do have, it gives us time to work on weaning us off those non-recurring revenue sources.
Mark, I have a question. I know that you're going to be floating some bonds. Do you have some kind of projection about the increase in the debt service on that whole fixed cost?
Yes, we do. I mean, we're estimating that we're going to end up with probably a little conservative right now. We're using, I think, about 3.75 to 4% interest rate on what we plan on issuing. We have our authorized and unissued list already. We know what that is. Again, we reduced that by about $4 million of existing projects that are going to go away. So we know what the remaining balance is, and we're using an estimated interest rate. We can project out what the annual debt service is on that.
Okay.
And so that's pretty easy to do, and we have that factored into our budget projection right now for the general fund as well as any enterprise fund projects. We do have switching over to the enterprise funds a little bit. Sewer, solid waste, and water all have rate hearings coming up in mid-March. I think March 18th is our public meeting for the rate hearings for any rate increases for sewer, water, and solid waste. We've been working with our outside consultant on the rate projection models. For those three operations, we are projecting rate increases somewhere in the neighborhood of 4.5% to 5% for water. I think around 5% for sewer and solid waste. I don't know yet. Haven't seen the rate projection model, the final rate projection model yet to see what they're proposing for a rate increase there, but there'll be an increase in there as well. And so but all the capital items that you see here that I showed you here tonight and emailed you previously, all those capital projects have been baked into those rate projections to ensure that we have a funding source to pay back any new debt service that's issued to pay for those.
Excellent. Thank you for that.
Uh,
Any questions
Yeah,
from committee members?
yes, I'm sorry. Yes, I have a couple of questions, Mark. Uh, are, is there going to be a supplied data for the operating budget that we can take a look at as a whole? I saw the report from last year, and I'm just thinking, is there, data and information that comes from, collected operating budget that we could work off of to generate the next report?
Absolutely, yeah. Similar to the capital program development
Okay.
here, we will be sharing files with the whole committee, and more specifically the subcommittee on the operating budget. As we develop those, similar to the capital program, all the requests that you saw, we'll be sharing with you all the requests on this on the operating budget side as well. We'll also be sharing with you projections, revenue projections, as well as fixed cost projections, and similar to what you've seen on the capital side. So that's all happens as we develop it. We'll get it out to you soon thereafter, so we can start discussing those.
Okay, thank you. Just getting an understanding, getting my arms around it, or head wrapped around it, so I know what's coming. The second question had to do with the high school, and I can't remember the name of the school, but the special school that students go to. What is the cost of a per student at Barnstable High School relatively the same as the cost per student at the special school that we pay for?
The tech school,
Tech school,
Cape Cod
thank
Regional
you.
Technical High School.
Yeah.
No, I think that the cost per student's a little higher at a technical school, typically because of the nature of the programming that's done in a technical schooling environment. You'll see, and that's not uncommon. Typically, technical high schools spend more per student just by the nature of their academic programs.
Okay. And that's all funded by the town. There is no parental funding of those students that go to the
No, they're
technical
public
school.
schools. Yeah, they're public school systems. They do receive state aid
Okay.
under the Chapter 70 funding formula. And they do have fees, minor amount of fees, not a lot, but
Sure.
whatever the net budget is after state aid and other fees that they charge, like for transportation programs, whatever that net remaining budget is, gets allocated out to the communities who belong to that school system, that regional school system, based on the student enrollment data.
Okay.
So Barnstable is about roughly 30% of the overall enrollment of that tech school. So we get about 30% of that net operating cost allocated to us.
Okay. Thank you. I'm just getting myself oriented to the school system.
Yeah, it's a lot. There's a lot to it. It's not easy. It's not straightforward. Oh, speaking of state aid, forgot to mention that in our projections. So, of course, the governor came out with the budget proposal at the end of January, and what was presented for local aid in the budget proposal was pretty close to what we had built into our general fund projection. So no significant increases anywhere in revenues. Chapter 70 program, unrestricted government aid. So we're pretty much on target with what the state has put out there with their first cut. Of course, that's going to go through the legislative process. The House is going to come out with their version. Senate's going to come out with their vision. Then the two together shall meet and come out with their final conference committee version, which is always different than what the governor proposes, and it's usually a little better. I think the legislature always likes to provide a little bit better, rosier funding than what the governor originally proposes. So that remains to be seen.
Good. Good. Jeremy, you're smiling there. Do you have any comments?
Well, I am meeting from the PAC, which I was glad was on the list of some suggested funding. We are rehearsing right now for The Little Mermaid, which I am in as well as my daughter. So I can vouch for that funding being nicely approved. I was curious about there was an article in the Globe today looking at technical schools, and the way that students are accepted was proposed to be changed to a lottery system. But also the acknowledgement was made that there's not enough students that are graduating from these schools. So I don't know if like the municipal school program seems like it needs a big shift. And is that something that is being discussed kind of amongst the municipal folks on the Cape of like, can we increase the amount of students that we have? Because it seems that we don't have enough kids that are graduating to enter the trades. And, you know, we're limited at our school because we can't compete with the tech school, which we certainly understand, but it seems like the model itself is not working as well as we need it to. So that was just a thought as you were talking about those that I
I
had.
have a question. I'm not sure I understood your, are you saying that the schools are not, we don't have enough schools for the students? What
Yeah,
was your reference?
the graduates are not meeting the needs for the jobs available. So
So there's not enough graduates,
yeah,
not that they're not, not that they don't have enough students in the school. The schools are full.
yeah, the schools are, you know, they're rejecting many students a year. So the look at how do we create more trade students, I guess. It wasn't certainly a lottery system. It changes the dynamic of who gets accepted to these schools, but it doesn't seem like it addresses the underlying issue that we don't have enough space and students. So that was just a thought. I certainly don't know if it's been in discussion, but it seems like it might need to be.
Interesting. All right, I think we've covered the operating budget. Mark, any communications from you or your team that you haven't covered so far?
No, sir. That's all I have for this evening.
Okay. All right, any communications from members of the committee? Jim Sproul, how's the CIP?
So we met
project
last
going?
week and went over our initial edits and drafts. Jeremy, you and I will have to get together to go over your PowerPoint submission, and we just need to start off with more of a Word document. But it's just a matter of transferring the information of the content into the proper format. But and Chuck's done great work, so we're just plodding along.
And your meeting tomorrow night at 6?
Yes.
Great. I'm gonna try to join that session if I could. Great. Tom Kane, how are things? You're muted, Tom.
I know, things are fine.
Are you on the Cape? Are you in Washington?
I'm in Washington, D.C. right now.
What's the mood in Washington?
Grim.
Yeah. Not surprised.
Yeah.
Which brings me, I had a question, Mark. All the activity in Washington by the Musk-Trump administration, any direct impacts on the town? Have we felt anything yet in terms of budget cuts, headcount reductions, anything like that?
Not yet, and we have not been informed by Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, or DESE, about any cuts to federal grant programs that we currently participate in. We have, we receive several $1 million a year through Title I programs, IDEA for special education programs. It's all federal money. We've been getting our reimbursements. Even though, they put a freeze on that and then they took the freeze off. We have not seen any freeze in our revenues, or have not been notified of any cuts to existing programs. And that includes the 25 grants that we've already been awarded. And we're still planning going forward 26 with what we're getting from the state as far as what to project the 26 federal grant revenue. So And nothing to date yet, but it makes me wonder. I'm shaking my head every day, wondering, listening to the rhetoric that's going on there, about how it's going to impact us at the local level eventually.
So I can
So-
share that MIT is on, they just went on a complete freeze. They're getting the message that they will not be receiving the funding levels that they had. So I'm sure in the academic, the university level, there's going to be big effects. That will probably trickle down, I'm sure, at some point.
yeah, well, which leads me, Mark, as a budgeting matter, as a planning or projections matter, how, suppose a chunk of money disappears that you've assumed will be coming our way for fiscal 2026. How do Elves and Milne and the others on town administration, how do you handle that? You don't have a slush fund hanging around that you can draw from.
Well, that's just it. That's why you have a slush fund, right? If all of a sudden a funding source dries up with no advance notice, why you keep a reserve. And we have one of the healthiest reserve levels that we've ever had right now, and we could always draw upon that. Secondly, if you didn't have that, you'd have to immediately implement cuts to programs. And if it's a capital project, you would have to, consider halting that capital program or that capital project immediately and figuring out what the replacement funding source is going to be. And again, do you tap your reserves to backfill the federal aid that you were anticipating for that capital project, or do you not continue with the capital project and you just abandon it? So, one of the main reasons why you keep a fund reserve aside, the council's policy reserve is 4% of the annual operating budget amount, and that's roughly right now between $8 and $9 million. But in addition to that, we have another 23 million. So we're positioned well to handle a situation like that.
So we get money from the federal government, we get money from the state. Does the state get money from the federal government to give to us? Trickle down?
Yeah, many of the school operating funds that we receive from the state are actually trickle down, money, pass through money from federal programs.
Okay.
That's what most of that is. And, I think it's about anywhere from $3 to $4 million a year in federal aid that we get that comes through DESE at state level and then to us. And that's across, the Commonwealth. There's a lot of school districts receive a lot of funds for Title I programs and special education programs.
Thanks. Thank you.
Well, it is interesting times. Chris Lozon, you're keeping a dignified silence. Any particular thoughts?
No, nothing in particular. On that subject though, the school funding, is that primarily the federal money the town gets? Does the town get any other kind of federal money, or is it mostly school stuff?
For operations at schools. Yeah, we get a small amount of money under the Community Development Block Grant Program, about $300,000 a year. We haven't been informed of any cuts there. And that's not used for operations. That's really project specific. And interestingly, we're working with Yarmouth collaboratively on a regional Barnstable Yarmouth TDBG program for fiscal year 20 or for calendar year 25. You may have seen some public advertisements for that recently. The airport is a big recipient of federal funding through the FAA on their capital program. No indications of any cuts to that so far to date. We haven't heard anything, but our airport manager and commission meet with officials from the FAA on a regular basis to review and update the capital program, multi-year capital program out at the airport, and what is available for funding their capital projects. We participate in an airport improvement program, which is like an entitlement program, and We get a certain amount of money out of that every year, but then there's also a lot of discretionary funding that comes from the FAA that we've been receiving on some of our larger projects over the past few years, those runway reconstruction projects, for example. And so, yeah, we've gotten a lot of money at the airport for the capital program. And I think transportation systems like airports, are a critical component of the nation's infrastructure. Probably not a high level target for significant cuts. But who knows? These are uncertain times, that's for sure.
We are in uncharted territory, yes.
Mhm.
No, that's it. I don't really have any other questions. Just curious.
What about in the area of housing, Mark? We do have some Section 8 housing in town, is that correct?
Yeah, it's all run by the Barnstable Housing Authority. That's not the town of
Right.
Barnstable.
Ah. So the town gets no direct funds from the federal government or the state for housing.
No. We get occasionally grant money. That's it. For housing. That's it. Just some grants, targeted grants. We have to apply for those. They're competitive in nature. So we don't have any entitlements.
Hmm.
The only entitlement we have is that CDBG program, and the airport improvement program, and those programs in the public education system that I mentioned, Title I, special education. Those are the big entitlement programs.
All right, interesting times. Any other comments, Lillian? Do you have anything to add?
No, I don't.
Okay. All right, well, I believe that we've pretty much gone through the entire agenda in 67 minutes, which is pretty good, unless anyone has any other comments.
Oh, the only thing I have to say is, I will be traveling without Zoom, so I will miss the next meeting.
Next meeting.
Yeah.
All right, thank you.
I
hope
will
you're go-
also be traveling. Gareth will be hosting that meeting on March 10th.
Okay. Great. All right, well, thanks everybody for your time, for an efficient meeting. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Chris?
Hector,
Yes.
Chuck,
Yes.
Lillian,
Yes.
Jim,
Yes.
Tom,
Yes.
Jeremy,
Yes.
Chris King,
Yes.
and I'm a yes. We're all
Great.
done.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.